everyone. Welcome to our Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors meeting for Wednesday, June 9th, 2021. And I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Our little COVID announcement. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with State of California Executive Order N2920, dated March 17th, 2020, in consideration of the coronavirus COVID-19. All members of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors and staff will participate in this meeting by teleconference. Members of the public may observe this meeting electronically by accessing the meeting via instructions at the top of the agenda. Public comments that were sent in advance will be read within the public comment period or the applicable agenda item. The public will also have an opportunity to provide comments during the meeting. The public may provide comments on any matter listed on the agenda. Speakers are customarily limited to 3 minutes each. However, the board chair may increase or decrease the time allotted to each speaker based on the number of speakers, the length of the agenda, and the complexity of the subject matter. Speaking time will not be decreased to less than 1 minute. And with that, could we get a roll call vote?
Yes.
The roll call, please.
Thank you. Chair Ibekoga.
Here.
Vice Chair Gibbons.
Here.
Willie.
Here.
Hilton.
Here.
Fliger.
Here.
Tyson.
Here.
Benny.
I vote here.
Thank you. Shua.
Here.
Makachuk.
Present.
Walia.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Ellenberg.
I'm here.
Thank you. And I will note that Director Martinez Beltran is currently absent, but we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on a non-agendized item? If so, please raise your hand if you're in the attendee box. And if you're on the phone, please hit *9. And we have Joanna Gardias. Let's see if you can unmute yourself to speak, please.
Yeah, hello. Good evening,
Yeah.
Chair Abekoga and directors. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. I'm Joanna Gardias, and I'm working with the Community Climate Action Group, Menlo Spark, and the Fossil Free Buildings Silicon Valley campaign. I'm commenting today to share the good news that the Fossil Free Buildings campaign has successfully launched our Electric Homes Ambassador program to connect people who have already electrified part or all of their homes with those looking to do so. And we already have a network of over 30 ambassadors from many different cities helping others electrify, and more than 10 households that have used the program to expedite their research involved with electrifying their homes. We believe that this type of interpersonal support is crucial to get people to make the switch to electric appliances and ultimately to make substantial changes in our reduction targets, likewise for meeting the SVCE 2030 carbon emission reduction goals. We're very, very appreciative of all of your leadership on building electrification, and we hope to partner with you all in a regional effort to phase out fossil fuel use. So basically, we would like to ask you if you could help promote or support the Electric Home Ambassador program. We'd appreciate it if you guys could circulate it in your newsletter or support it or use it in any other way that fits your goals. The program is free and accessible to everyone online at our website at fossilfreebuildings.org, where anybody is also able to email us and get in touch for more information. So thank you for listening, and I hope that we're able to get in contact about the program so that we could potentially help you meet your goals. Thank you.
Margaret, you're muted.
Muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gardias. I know we're not supposed to comment too much on non-agendized items, but congratulations on your program. And I'm going to ask our staff to maybe follow up with you to see how we can connect. Very exciting. Thank you. I don't see anyone else in the attendee box. Do we have any written public comments that came in?
No public comments received.
Okay, great. Then I will close this item and we will go to the consent calendar. These items will be voted on by one vote. Are there any members of the board who would like to pull any items or comment on any items on the consent calendar? I don't see any hands, so if not, I will open it up for public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on a consent item? And I don't see any hands, and do we have any written comments?
No public comments.
We'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. If there's no other comments, happy to entertain a motion in a second. Yes, Member Larson.
Move the consent calendar.
Thank you. And Vice Chair.
I second.
Great. We have a motion by Member Larson, second by the Vice Chair. Any other discussion? If not, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Chair Ibekoga,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibbons,
Aye.
Willie,
Aye.
Hilton,
Aye.
Flagger,
Yes.
Tyson,
Yes.
Rennie,
Aye.
Chua,
Aye.
Mekachuk,
Aye.
Walia,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Ellenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. And that motion, oh, actually, Martinez Beltran, you've joined us. Would you like to vote on the consent calendar?
Sure. Aye.
Thank you so much. Motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you so much. We'll go on to our regular calendar. Item 2 is our CEO report, and we have our CEO, Mr. Balachandran. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair Ibekoga and members of the SVCE board. We have a few updates today. First, I'd like to kind of invite you again, based on an email I sent at the end of May, to a meeting that we'll be having on June 22nd that we're calling Road to 2035. And we say 2035 because that's when Governor Newsom's executive order to ban the sale of internal combustion engines in California, that's his goal. So on June 22nd at 10 a.m., we'll have a discussion with key state leaders, the California Air Resources Board Chairman, Leanne Randolph, and CPUC Commissioner Cliff Rechtschaffen. So that's going to be an hour from 10 to 11. You are all welcome to attend. Please respond to the email and we will make sure you get the appropriate virtual meeting link. So the context of this is the governor's executive order and the proposed budget adds $3.2 billion in funding for transportation electrification. And the goal of having this meeting is to raise SVCE's profile, engage with state leadership, and highlight opportunities for local and state collaboration. The key focus areas are going to be funding and finance, programs for multifamily charging, and electric vehicle grid integration. Staff from all our agencies have been invited to attend a working session immediately following the 1-hour meeting. And that will also be attended by senior agency staff from CARB and the CPUC. Just say this is also quite aligned with some comments made by the executive committee a couple of weeks ago. So we will put that invite into our talking points also after the meeting as a reminder. My next item is going to be an update from our Director of Policy, Melissa Charles.
Good evening, everybody. There is a lot going on the policy side. I do want to talk about two issues. So the first one is a decision that came out of the CPUC related to integrated resource planning. And the CPUC issued a decision which proposed a mandate of 11,500 megawatts of new procurement during what they call the midterm period. So that's 2023 to 2026. There is a lot in this decision. I think the key provisions there are within that mandate, 1,000 megawatts need to be procured of long duration storage. And there is another 1,000 megawatt target for what they call long lead time resources. And that includes resources like geothermal. Like I said, there's a lot in this decision. I want to keep it short, but I do want to let you know that SVCE, along with 3CE, are going to be filing comments tomorrow on the decision. And we're also coordinating closely with CAISO on their comments as well, just to get clarification, because there's a number of new requirements, new rules. Some of them conflict with existing requirements. Some of them need a little bit more development and clarification. And so we are working, as we speak, we are working on comments to file tomorrow there. I will stop and see if there are any questions on this item.
Any questions from the board first? No? All right.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
more to come on that. And then the other one is I just want to give what is now a regular update on SB 612. So as we discussed in previous meetings, the CPUC did adopt a decision related to the issues in SB 612, which are legacy energy resources. Unfortunately, the decision did not include all the allocations in SB 612 that basically allow us to help reduce the PCIA or help reduce our costs. So that was disappointing, but we're going to continue to move forward with SB 612. My team, Bena, is working hard on outreach on SB 612, and we're going to continue to request support on that. And I mentioned this in the ROC meeting. I'm going to mention it again and probably mention it in future meetings, but I do want to thank the board for all your support. You've been very engaged. You've been great. We've been working with the various, speaking at the various city council meetings, and again, just very much appreciate your support as we try to build our broad base of support for this bill. I'll stop there and see if there are any questions there.
Any questions? Yes, Director Walia.
Thank you, Chair. So, Militia, what has been not approved, or what has been approved? What's the delta, essentially?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
That's a great question. So there's a couple of provisions in terms of the allocations. And so what we asked for in SB 612 are allocations on RPS, allocations on resource adequacy, so that's related to reliability, and ongoing allocations on greenhouse gas products or resources with greenhouse gas reductions or contribute to greenhouse gas reductions. The decision does allow for RPS, which is good. The decision does not allow for RA or reliability. So that is a big concern to us. And then when it comes to allocations related to greenhouse gas reductions, there is a provision that allows for an allocation in 2023, but doesn't allow it in perpetuity. So that's, again, an issue for us. So that's kind of where the delta is. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Any impacts on PCIA that we were looking for and not going to get?
I mean, I think it all impacts the PCIA. So if you think about the PCIA in terms of calculations, there's the cost of the PCIA, and then within the calculation, there's certain benefits. And all those allocations I talked about are on the benefit side of the equation. So if those are included in the calculation, they help reduce the PCIA. So the more allocations that we get, that can potentially help reduce the PCIA.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions? Well, I had one. Even though we didn't get everything we wanted, I'm assuming we will continue to support it, but are we supporting it, the original version, or are we going to be okay with the amended version, it sounds like?
So there's two different things. So there is the bill itself, which has been amended slightly, but those allocations I talked about are still in there. So we'll continue to support the bill wholeheartedly. And then there is the decision itself, which isn't as far as we want it to go. So at this point, we want to see the bill go forward. It's not, the decision didn't come down to the place we want it to come down to.
And a bill would make that happen then? Is that?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, great.
Exactly.
Thank you. Anyone else? It doesn't look like we have more, Ms. Charles?
I do. Thank you, Mel. The next and last part of the presentation I have in the CEO report, I'd like to call Pamela Leonard to provide the board an update on communications related to getting ready for potential reliability events this summer. Pam?
Good evening, directors. Nice to see you all. I have a brief presentation that I'll run through to talk about how we are doing a lot this summer to proactively communicate what's different in terms of power supply preparedness and what we will be communicating to customers. So if we could just go into the presentation, thank you. So we have I mentioned some proactive communications that we're going to be doing to prepare for expected flex alerts, and which are just voluntary calls for conservation. And in the event of any other emergencies like we experienced last summer, we do have a plan in place for that. And just to provide a reminder and overview of how we communicate public safety power shutoff events to our customers. So first, the content that we have been working on preparing and will be sharing out soon is a fact sheet that just kind of highlights and provides some FAQs around, what's different this summer, what are differences between these kinds of events, useful information that will be made available to all of you, to customers, to your staff, city staff, in case there are any inquiries about this topic. We'll also be providing a digital media toolkit with ready to share content, cut and paste graphics, an example on the right there from what we prepared last year when there were Flex Alert events that you're all available to use. And we'll also be sharing that with member agency staff. And SVCE will also be sending out our own communications through our channels. And we are proactively communicating programs that customers may be interested in. If a customer lives in an area that has been prone to having power shutoffs, we do have resilience programs. We do have a solar and battery storage assistant through the eHub. So these are other things that we're communicating out into the community. And what I'm gonna go through quickly is there is a protocol we've established for event-specific communications. So whether it's a voluntary call for conservation or an actual emergency, there's just some slightly different tactics that we'll be deploying around those situations. And in all cases, though, we will be keeping you informed. Those of you who were on the board last summer when we dealt with these events recall the many emails I was sending you with information and updates as we were getting it. So for those of you who didn't experience that yet, you will see that we like to keep everyone informed as we get information from the state. So next slide. So just an overview of what CAISO has for their alert, warning, and emergency system. They're the ones who, as the grid operator, are going to notify stakeholders and customers of potential events, like a need to conserve. And they have this system, you can see outlined on the right there. So a Flex Alert, that's a voluntary call for conservation. Again, it's typically forecasted. You can see that they can predict when there's going to be extreme heat, which puts more demand on the grid, particularly in the evening hours as solar is going down. So that's when they're going to call a Flex Alert between that peak demand time from 4 to 9 p.m. That is one of the improvements from last summer. They have a lot of improvements to this system. Last summer, they kept changing the times of Flex Alerts, so we would have to update all of our graphics and send out more updates and messages. So they lined it up to consistently always be from 4 to 9 p.m. And that does tie nicely to the time of use rate transition that we have ongoing currently. They then have these other stage 1, 2, and 3 emergencies. Those are actually when they are forecasting a shortage or a potential shortage in supply. And they also recommended, we had a meeting with some CAISO staff with CalCCA's marketing group, and they did share that their Twitter is the best place to get information. It's the most up to date, but I should have added this to the slide, but if you go to flexalert.org, customers are also able to sign up directly for these kinds of updates. They also have an app, and those were kind of the things that they were pushing to streamline their communications. So we'll go on from there. So for Flex Alerts, when there is this voluntary call for conservation, we will share that information with the board and our MOG. And we will have already shared some prepared messaging that can be sent out on social channels. We will have our messages available in multiple languages as we did last year. Those will all be provided in the toolkit. And we will be doing a proactive, limited next door post, just letting people know again what to expect this summer and what these different alert systems mean. And we will activate a website pop-up for SVCE, letting people know that an event is in progress. And then what's new is that we do now have the capabilities with our more advanced emailing system that we got up and running this last fall, is that we will be emailing large energy users, residential customers. This is specifically residential customers, as well as EV drivers who may have a lot of demand and request that they conserve during these times. There is a separate program for large commercial customers that's being run by PG&E, and we're working on joint communications to do outreach for that program. So that is a different topic. And then back to those lists of emergency alerts and systems. If there's a stage 1 emergency, we'll be doing the same communications protocol here, because they're very similar. So next slide. So what's different here if there's a stage 2 emergency is because the situation will be a bit more serious. In this case, it is really strongly urging customers to conserve. And so we will utilize a next door alert. So again, we didn't have a next door set up as a tool for us last year when we went through these issues, but we do have that this year. So this will proactively push out communications to customers and make it a bit more urgent. And we will also have an email ready to go for all residential and small and medium business customers that we can request the need to conserve to that group. And then next slide. And a stage 3 emergency, this is what happened last August, where power was actually shut off for some customers. Rotating outages were implemented. Did not necessarily affect Santa Clara County, but without knowing for sure whether or not that's going to happen, we will just do the best that we can to continue to share information as we're getting it from CAISO, PG&E. The County Office of Emergency Management is prepared for these sorts of events as well, and have lots of resources for the community, including cooling centers and places where people can, well, they're not power outrage resources. I'm seeing my typo there. So it's outage resources. So where customers could go in case they need to charge devices or things like that. Next slide. In a PSPS event, this really is a PG&E led program. So we receive information directly from PG&E about when they're expecting a PSPS event to take place. They also really proactively communicate directly to customers in these events. So they're emailing, they're texting, they're calling customers, particularly those on medical baseline program. So we're just going to continue to do what we have done, which is to complement PG&E's communications, because they're going to be the ones who have the most up-to-date info about when power may be restored or going off. And we'll just make sure that our customers are aware of resources, like PG&E will put up community resource centers, again, to help those who may need some shelter from heat or power to charge devices. And again, it's an opportunity for us to promote our existing resilience programs and solar and battery storage to customers who may be impacted. And next slide, I think, oh yeah, that's it. I just had some backup info just in case it's needed. Thank you, that's it.
Any questions? Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Pamela. Really important for our constituents. Thank you very much. And the improvements from last year are well received. I just wanted to confirm, you mentioned that you're going to send the information out to the board of directors and then some constituent agencies. Would that include the PIO from Fish Cities and the city clerk as well? Good.
Yeah, I typically include the PIOs when we're asking them to send out social media messaging or doing any communications. I haven't in the past included the clerks, but we could take note of that.
Our PIO position is vacant at the moment, so I think that the city clerk is our designated person for community interface. So that may be true for other cities as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, Mr. Balachandran, do you have any?
No, Brian Mekachik has hand
I'm
raised.
sorry. Yes, Director.
A couple of comments / questions. How many customers will be on time of use when we're going to the expected outages?
So what we've been seeing and what we had seen through a previous time of use rate pilot that we had a couple years ago with the city of Milpitas is 20 to 30% of the eligible accounts decline the transition and will go to a different time of use rate or remain on a tiered rate. So that seems to be tracking with the latest information that I've seen from PG&E. So of the eligible customers, which I believe, don't have exact numbers, but of the eligible customers, I think, yeah, we could expect about a third or less will not be on the time of use rate that is now the default. However, we don't know yet if they're choosing a different time of use rate. So that transition is happening this month. So we'll be able to know more next month.
I'm sorry, what I intended to ask was, of all of SVCE's customers, only a certain portion will go to time of use each month. In any event, I think the messaging for them should be tailored, because if you're on time of use, you're at the most expensive time. So it's in their best financial interest to reduce their power usage, because that's when they pay the most for power. So there's kind of a comment. And then the second question is an operational one, and maybe it's for Garish. Do we have battery storage? And is there a way to, when we release our battery storage, is it throttled, or are we able to basically pump as much electricity from our battery storage into the grid as possible? Because basically, if things go down, then we don't have a use for that power, do we? If you could comment on that, please.
I'll take that. Yes, we can schedule our batteries any way we want to. So, but we are scheduling it into the grid. And some of these outages are local outages. So there are two kinds of outages. So customers may still see that. I know you get that, but yeah, we can throttle it up.
I guess what I would think would be best is if there's going to be local, well, the local outages are due to fire. So okay, sort of just thinking out loud. Anything we could do to release more energy, if it's helpful, we should do that.
Oh, that's for sure. That's part of what every utility will be doing. And the CAISO will be asking for that kind of behavior from all utilities. Yeah. They have a separate form of communication to all of us.
Okay, Director Tyson.
Thank you. And thank you, Pamela, for that presentation. I thought that was very clear. I guess I have a question about this whole time of use. It makes perfect sense, but I looked at my own bill, and the difference in pricing between the peak period and the rest of it is very small. It's 2 cents out of 28 cents or something like that. And I'm just wondering, is this just a factor right now? Is this a difference that we think will change? Because frankly, I'm not seeing the big deal right now.
I see Don Bray has unmuted, so I think I'm going to let him take this question.
jumping in on a time of use question. So you're right. During the winter season, that difference between peak and off-peak for residential rate, the most common residential rate is only 2 cents. During the summer, it's 6 cents. So it is, and summer is defined as June 1 through September 30. So it's a little higher then, but you're exactly right.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see anyone else, so I'm going to open this up for public comment. Any members of the public wishing to speak? I don't see any hands. Do we have any written comments? No. All right, then we will close this item. Thank you. And go on to item 3, an update on SVCE annual net energy metering surplus cash out policy. And we have Mr. Bray again.
All right, thank you, Chair Abikoga, and good evening, directors. If I could have the next slide, please. So tonight, we're going to talk about what amounts to a tactical proposed update to our NEM annual cash out policy. We've underlined tactical because we don't want this to be confused with something much larger and more strategic that's happening in Sacramento right now. The NEM 3.0 proceeding is underway, where solar net energy metering more broadly in California is being discussed. Currently, we pay each year customers who over-generate over the course of the year a cash out payment. If they generate surplus retail credits, we pay them that amount each April. And that's, in comparison to what PG&E does and other CCAs do, a very rich policy. This year we'll be paying close to $1 million in surplus generation payments to our customers. Those amounts are much lower at PG&E and some of our neighboring CCAs. So we think there's an opportunity to look at this policy and maybe reduce some of this cash out expenditure. We think we can do it and still compare favorably with PG&E, and we think we can introduce an equity component that's important. We'll talk about that as we go through this. Next slide, please. So currently, each April, customers that have a NEM generation credit balance that's greater than $100 are paid that full retail amount up to a total of about $5,000. They'll be getting at least 7 cents a kilowatt hour of credit, or in some cases, almost an infinite amount, because it's actually possible to have a retail balance that's positive, even if you haven't over-generated during the year. It depends on when you generate. If you generate at a time that's higher value than when you use electricity, you can actually have a surplus retail balance and not have generated more kilowatt hours than you've used. So that's an important thing, complicated, but important to understand. On the PG&E side, they pay each year only for surplus hours, kilowatt hours that you've generated, and they pay a low amount. They pay a wholesale value of 2.7 cents a kilowatt hour. That number changes a little bit month to month, but that's what it currently is, and that's generally the neighborhood that it's in. So we're paying a much higher amount to our customers who overgenerate, and we're paying sort of whether or not they've generated a surplus kilowatt hour balance. Next slide, please. So this is what payouts look like, and this was in 2020. I mentioned this last year was close to $1 million. We're still finalizing the numbers for this year, but for last year, we paid close to $800,000 in cash out payments, and those who received cash outs, and that was about 13% of our solar customers, averaged close to $250 if they're a residential customer, or $1,400 if they were a commercial customer. So these are nice checks for our customers to get. A little over 10% of our solar customers are getting these. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's a proceeding going on up in Sacramento right now, NEM 3.0 proceeding. You may have been reading about this. There's general concern that NEM customers are being underwritten by non-NEM customers, and that the benefits of solar more generally are accruing to the wealthier customers or single-family homeowners. So there's broad interest in having the NEM policy updated to encourage more equitable access to solar. At the same time, those in the solar industry, of course, don't want to see the policy changed rapidly or in a way that would overly harm the industry. So this notion of gradualism in policy change is being encouraged. But yeah, big debate going on over this right now. This isn't the same thing we're talking about, but it is a backdrop that's currently out there. Next slide. Looking at our payouts and thinking back to our SEVI quartiles that we've discussed in the past, right? So if we divide our service territory and the census tracts in our service territory into essentially income brackets, SEVI 1 being the wealthiest, SEVI 4 the least. This is how our payouts went. So we saw more than 2/3 of our payouts go to customers in SEVI 1 and SEVI 2 quartiles, and the remaining third to SEVI 3 and SEVI 4 quartiles. So certainly tipped in the direction of the wealthier areas. We have about 23,000 NEM customers in total. And again, about 13% of those, or close to 3,000, are getting these credits. And we also have a total of about 1,000 CAISO customers, solar customers. Just because we're going to come back to that in a minute here. Next slide, please. So if we were to change our policy to do what PG&E does and pay only for surplus kilowatt hours and pay that net surplus compensation rate of 2.7 cents, our cash out this, in 2020 would have amounted to about $64,000 versus the $791,000 that we paid out. So you can see that, that's a very dramatic savings if we were to adopt the PG&E policy. If we were to go to a 2 times net surplus compensation, that amount would have been $200,000, and so we would have had savings of about $600K. So this is where we're going to be talking about a change that will take us in the direction of NSC, and one of the questions is what sort of a multiple of PG&E might we want to contemplate here. And the savings, of course, are going to tie back to that multiple. Next slide, please. This is what some of our neighboring CCAs have done. Many had a policy like ours when they launched, and recently have made some changes. And I won't drain this list, but you can see that most CCAs are in the, let's say, 1.5 to 2x of PG&E's net surplus compensation rate. So they'd be in the 3.5 to 5.5 cent range for surplus kilowatt hours. So there's no possibility of being paid if you haven't over-generated kilowatt hours. Merely having a retail balance that's positive won't qualify you. You have to have those surplus kilowatt hours. EBCE also did something interesting. They are incrementally providing cash out funds to CAISO customers. So their policy makes a distinction. If you're a CAISO customer, the policy is a little richer. Okay, next slide, please. So this is what we would like to propose, and we're looking for your feedback on this. Based on the feedback that we get tonight, we would bring an actual change to the policy and a resolution to the next meeting. But we're proposing that effective going forward in April of 22, so we'd finish the retail balance process for this cash out year, if you will, and then in April of 2022, we go to a 2x net surplus compensation rate. So that's 5.4 cents at the current NSC value. For Carefira customers, we would make that amount 2.5x. So that would be 6.75 cents. And again, this is based on the production of surplus kilowatt hours. The cutover, as I mentioned, would happen after the retail cash out is complete in April of 2022. We think this is important for a few reasons. One, we're not changing horses in the middle of the stream for our NEM customers today. They would complete this year under the current policy. And there are also some issues just with making this change systematically. We have to work with our data services provider at Calpine, and there are also some minor complications actually with the TOU transition and some protections that are afforded to customers under that. So it's cleanest to do this cutover in an April and to start that going forward next year. So that's the recommendation. We're very interested in board direction on this. Ready to take any questions.
Thank you. Director Rennie.
Thank you, Chair. Dawn, so in regards to the question about whether we're doing net retail dollars or net kilowatts, I was thinking, so if somebody has a solar system with a battery and they decide to dump the battery, if they can, I'm assuming this is technically possible, onto the grid during the 4 to 9 period versus generating in the usual solar hours, they would be making more money that way. And I would think we'd actually want to encourage that, right? We want to move more power onto the grid during the 4 to 9. But if we went to only net kilowatt hours, they wouldn't be incentivized to do that. Am I making sense?
Yeah, they're already incentivized to do that, right? The tariff should incentivize them to in a sense use their power during the highest cost periods, and you know, to my knowledge, you don't get credit for dumping it back onto the grid out of your battery. It's only reducing usage that you get credit for. Maybe there's a solar customer that can refine that answer, but yeah, the value of the battery, I believe, is principally to help you not use power during that peak period, as opposed to getting credit for pushing power back onto the grid at that time.
But technically that might appear in the future and might be something we want to encourage. But I guess if we did go with the net kilowatt only, we could change it in the future if we saw this technical solution coming. But if we did that, we might not encourage the development of that technical solution either. Thank you.
Director Mekachuk.
Thanks. I've got solar on my roof, and I have a couple of Tesla batteries and electric cars, 3 cars. So I use a lot of electricity, even though I generate a lot of electricity. We have no natural gas going into the house. What happens is essentially you store energy when it's produced by the solar panels, and then it's all discharged after you stop using solar. So that, as Don Bray said, that works automatically right now. I am wondering if, so first of all, to answer your question, Don, I support reducing the amount of the payout, and I think the number could be less than 2x. But one of the things is that I think we have to encourage more people to move to electric vehicles. And, you know, the best best thing for them to do is to use more power to for an electric vehicle, because essentially we're reducing the incremental cost of that. And if they're producing excess electricity and we're not reimbursing them for it, or we're reimbursing them at a lower rate, essentially their cost to power their EV goes down. And we should maybe include that as, consider including that as part of the messaging to those customers.
Great point. Yes.
I don't see any other hands, so let me go to public comment. I see Bruce Carney. Would you like to unmute yourself to speak, please?
Sure, thanks very much. The bill that was introduced into the assembly that got a lot of members of the community choice advocacy community riled up was called AB 1139. And it made a wide variety of proposed changes before it failed last week. Unusually, I think the vote was 27 for, 27 against, and 25 members of the assembly didn't vote. Maybe those of you with longer political experience can explain or recall other situations where so many members didn't want to take a stand one way or the other. But clearly what this implies to me is that there was a huge pushback against AB 1139, and it got killed for this session, but it may come back. There's a really strong group of people who are interested in social justice, who really see this excess compensation as a giveaway to the wealthy, as was mentioned in the presentation. And there's an equally large and vociferous group who see anything that in any way weakens the incentives for rooftop solar as a step backward in California energy policy. So I'm aware of good arguments on both sides of the equation. I think that reducing the excess compensation level makes sense, but I do want to warn the board that there are a lot of passion around this issue, and almost certainly when the reduction takes place, if it does, there will be angry customers with a lot to say. The other thing I wanted to say is that every solar system is quoted based on the solar vendor's understanding of the compensation that a customer would receive for a new system. And so please work with the solar industry to make sure that once the decision is made to change the compensation scheme, that their software can be upgraded or updated so that they won't be giving customers inaccurate estimates of the value that their newly installed solar system will produce. Obviously, every existing solar system was installed based on the current compensation. And so there will, that's one of the reasons why current solar customers may be disappointed when things change and they, begin receiving less compensation than they were used to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? I don't see any more hands. Do we have any written comments? No, thank you. Well, then I'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. And yes, Director Larson.
Yeah, thank you. So we've been talking a lot about residential customers, but I wanted to confirm that this would also apply to commercial industrial customers, and even like some of our member agencies have solar as well, that they would also be affected by this?
Yes, they would. If they're over generating, which again isn't super common, but if they are, they would be affected by this.
Okay, and so they would fall into the non-care FURA category, presumably?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to Director Tyson.
Yeah, let me just weigh in and say that I really like the proposal seen developed by the staff here in terms of seeing the issue in terms of the compensation, coming up with something that still, I don't know, bridges the different interests involved. And by that, the two times, and then also the higher rate for the care customers, and then also the fairly extensive delay. And so, I mean, our goal here is to have come up with something fair that also helps make sure that Silicon Valley Clean Energy is properly financed, I guess, and then to make sure that our systems are encouraging the kinds of behavior that we want. And I see that as if somebody does have overgeneration in their equipment, they might be more incentivized to put in that electric car, or as a commercial business, put in more charging stations, those sorts of things. So overall, I think it's a balanced plan, and I like the feel of it.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. So I think I think was a very good presentation. It outlined the issues clearly and what our course of action would be. I very much appreciate what Bruce Carney just said. I attended a Haas climate seminar on the equity issue. It is important not to understate the passion behind equity and utility cost, power in particular. So the preparation of our current, and then Bruce's second point was the future solar accounts, which hopefully will be me, that the analysis accurately reflects these changes. So that's going to take a special amount of outreach, I think. I think we have good connections with the solar providers for many different programs, but I thought I
think she's frozen. So we'll see if, oh, is that Vice Chair? No, I think she's frozen. So anyone else, we'll come back to her if she comes back. And if not, we can also take a motion to approve.
Tyson will move to approve.
Thank you. Is there
a second?
Great, thank you. So Tyson, Director Tyson makes the motion, and was it Director?
There we go. Am I back?
Yes, you're back. Sorry, we went ahead and took a motion in a second, but if you'd like to finish your comments, that'd be great.
I just wanted to say that I think I'm in support of what staff is recommending, but do want to emphasize that Bruce's comments were very relevant, and we need to pay attention to them.
Chair, if I just make one clarification here for the board. The item tonight was a discussion item to get direction from the board as to the development of the policy. So, Mr. Bray, the idea would be then get direction from the board tonight to come back with the actual formal policy at the August meeting.
Correct.
Yes. So just to clarify again, this is direction to staff to come back to a policy for formal adoption at the August meeting.
It could be in consent in August, but it would be exactly this.
Audra, you're muted.
I'm sorry, Director Martinez Beltran, and then we will, I guess, not take the motion in the second, then we'll erase that. But.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask, I know this is all based on ownership of the equipment, but I guess I'm curious to know, is there any talk, if we're really talking about equity and we're talking about trying to get people to truly move to electric, is there talk about compensating the user rather than the owner? For example, in rental situations, you might have multifamily, rental apartments or condos, whatever it is, but those who are renting and actually consuming and paying for the use of the energy, is there any talk or legislation around that?
So one thing I would note is that the check gets written to whoever is paying the bill. So if you, let's say you were renting and there was solar on your roof, it's associated with your electric account, and you would receive that compensation if you're the rate payer. If you're
So if it's an
if you-
affordable housing development, then that would go to whoever the renter is in that unit.
whoever is paying the PG&E bill, right? So whoever that, yeah, and if it were the, if that were being paid by whoever owned the complex, that would be a different story. But if the tenant is signed up with PG&E and paying the PG&E bill and has solar on their roof associated with that account, yeah, they would, and if they're generating more kilowatt hours than not, they would get the surplus payment.
Great, thank you for that.
Any other comments? Director Mekachuk.
That just made me think of something. I know that if you've got an electric vehicle, you can have a separate meter for your EV and a separate meter for your house. And would this not be an incentive for those customers with 2 meters to change to 1 meter? And I'm not sure if you know what I'm referring to, Don. Do you?
So that tariff that was 4 separate meters, it's pretty rare. Yeah, we don't have many of those, and I can't recall the rate that was, but it might have been EVB at the time. Yeah, it's pretty rare. So yes, that could occur, but I'd have to look into the details to see whether we have solar customers that could be impacted by that. That might be that might have, yeah, that type of EV charging setup.
Right. I don't see any other hands, so I think I got a sense that most are in approval of the suggested changes, and also there were some comments, and we'll just plan on seeing it in August on consent for a final vote then. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We go on to item 4, the SVCE strategic plan for fiscal year 22 update, and we go back to Mr. Balachandran.
Thank you, Chair Abikoga. And as Andrea brings up my presentation, I'll start. So each year we present you an update to our strategic plan. Last year, we had a couple of highlights. First, we reduced the length of our strategic plan, which was more like a work plan and strategic plan combined, by about half. And we also identified 5 strategic focus areas. You can go to the next slide, Andrea. So our strategic plan process kind of goes year-round. It starts in May, where the board starts my evaluation, kind of looking backwards at what SVCE and I have accomplished in the last year. And then over the May through August timeframe, you provide input on the strategic plan. And this has an impact on the CEO goals, also on the upcoming budget. And we work with the executive committee and the full board, like what we're doing today. And then in September, you're going to be approving the budget. And at the same time, the important piece would be the focus areas we want to be looking at over the next 12 to 18 months. And so we go through this process each year. Next slide. So stepping back as to who we are as an agency, we have a mission around providing clean, affordable, and reliable electricity and innovative programs to our customers, all with the goal of reducing our carbon emissions by a certain amount through 2021, 25, and 30. And I'll show you those goals in the upcoming slide. But taking it to the statewide level, you can see this chart where you see that the state has set aggressive goals for reducing carbon. And now these state goals are also supported by changes at the federal level. Next. SVCE has set aggressive carbon reduction goals, And over here, you'll see the first bar is where we were, where our service area was prior to us being formed and providing service to our customers in 2017. The top part of the bar are transportation emissions. The orange part of the bar are building and natural gas emissions. And right at the bottom in teal are electricity emissions in our service area. SVCE customers itself have essentially eliminated those carbon emissions. It's very de minimis. But what you see in green are essentially what direct access customers would be using. So next slide, please. So looking back over the last 4 years, we've been providing you this update each year, and we also have this in this month's CEO report. If you look at the bar on 2015 and then compare the bars in each succeeding year and focus on the 2020 bar, that's what we have for emissions last year. So we are at about 35% under what emissions were in 2015. And our target in our strategic plan was to be at 30% below 2015 numbers. Now, obviously, COVID had quite an impact on this. For example, compared to 2019, on-road vehicle miles traveled decreased by 25%. Residential electric consumption increased 10% because people were at home. However, residential gas consumption only increased 1%. Non-residential electricity consumption decreased 10%. And that's pretty, it's what you would expect given the number of businesses that were either shut down or not working at full capacity. And non-residential gas consumption decreased 19%. So these are the reasons why emissions were down 35%. And we'll be updating this each year and with a little more granularity in the upcoming years. And that's one of our work initiatives. Next slide, please. So I wanted to spend a few minutes here, and then I'll stop for a moment here to get your comments before going to the next slide. So this is high level, talking about some recent external shifts and opportunities. So at the national level, we can see that things have changed where the vaccination regime has brought the economy back. And with the stimulus, you can see the economy, the job market has come up and interest rates continue to be pretty low. There's also quite a focus on clean energy and clean transportation. The words a clean grid by 2035, we've not really heard that from the federal government before. In California, not only do we have a budget surplus, we're also heading into a drought. And as Pamela talked about, we may have wildfires and blackouts this summer that we need to get prepared for. In California, the 3 regulatory agencies that work on energy are the CPUC, the California Energy Commission, and the California Independent System Operator, also known as the CAISO. Reliability is directly tied to blackouts, and that's a big concern for all load-serving entities and our regulators. As Mel told you, the order has just come out where all load-serving entities have been mandated to procure 11,500 megawatts of mostly clean capacity. The next 2 bullets talk about refer to the PCIA and generation rate. These are the 2 variables that essentially define what kind of net margin that we have at SVCE. We price below PG&E's rate at a discount to PG&E's rate, and these 2 variables determine what kind of margin we have. And the PCIA continues to be volatile, and also it's difficult to decipher what it's going to look like. We have made quite a bit of progress on both these items. We have our staff and at CAISO, we've put in a lot of resources to get better information, and we'll be sharing that with you, with the Finance Committee first on August 2nd. On direct access, that was a threat that we had defined in the last several years. The CPUC has come out with an order, a proposed, should I say, a proposed decision, where they recommend direct access for commercial and industrial customers not be opened up right now. This is being debated at the CPUC, and we should have a decision, a proposed decision, followed by a decision very shortly. And this is a study that will be sent to the legislature. A big opportunity for us is demand flexibility. And as we've talked to you before, we have, through our innovation programs, we have looked at the electric vehicle side. We have something called grid shift. We have on the resilience side, we have something called Lights on Silicon Valley, where we'll be installing or providing rebates for the installation in thousands of homes and multifamily dwellings for energy storage. And that energy storage can actually be used to change our load shape and therefore provide us more value in terms of our cost. Lastly, customer debt continues to be an issue. We've talked to you about that, where through COVID, customers were allowed to postpone paying their bills. And as a result, the amount of arrearages for SVCE has actually at least doubled. So within the CCA world, CalCCA continues to be more effective each year that they've been around. And as you've noted in this, as we've updated you in this last year, SB 612 is the first time we've been taking such an active role in moving a bill forward. California Community Power was formed just this year, and 8 CCAs are looking at purchasing long duration energy storage. And so CC Power is an opportunity where we can leverage economies of scale to meet challenges such as what the PUC has put forth ahead of us on that 11,500 megawatt midterm procurement mandate. Western Community Energy is a small CCA that went bankrupt a few weeks ago, and they served about 6 cities in Western Riverside County. So that will also, that has a potential to have some impact on us, the CCA movement as a whole. I think there'll be more information requests about our financial state. So I wanted to stop here and see if there were any comments or questions or clarifications just in terms of external shifts and opportunities that the board may want to provide me before I go on to the next slide.
Any comments, questions, directors? Don't see any hands.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll go to the next slide. So we did provide this presentation to the executive committee. And so based on where we are right now, I'm not proposing any changes to the mission and our goals for 2025 and 2030. So that's what you have in the slide ahead of you. We can go to the next slide. Here's what the exec committee, I'm summarizing their input. They suggested that cyber risk should be elevated along with physical risk as a specific focus area for FY 2022. And we have elevated cyber risk, and we will be putting some of these into our work plan also. Another piece of input was to enhance the work plan to focus on transportation opportunities, including funding for each of our member agencies and also enhancing and strengthening regional collaboration. And last, to have resilience to be added to a goal and not necessarily change the mission at this point. And so we've gone ahead and we've drafted that as one of the changes. So I'd like to move to the next slide, which is my almost last slide. It is actually the most important one, I think, for us today, which is I would like to get your feedback on these 5 focus areas. And this would be important not just for you to provide direction to us, it'll help inform the goals that you'll be setting for me in the next couple of months. It'll also inform our budget priorities. Note that the staff work plan encompasses a lot more than these areas. We actually have 19 goals and 62 measures in an 8-page document of our strategic plan that you approve. So there are a lot of initiatives that are in flight already. So that's going to continue, but really to focus on what's changing and what we need to focus on in the next year. These are the 5 areas that I'm suggesting. First is additional staffing to maintain capacity. And this is relevant also to the item on the consent calendar that you just approved a few minutes ago, where over the last year I had a very similar focus area for adding capacity. We've kind of run to stay in place this year. Big picture, we've lost about 5 people and added 5 people. And we just learned that one of our key employees in the power supply side is going to be leaving us next week. Want to thank the board for adding a position, but I think with some of the vacancies we have, not just in power supply, but in other groups too, we really need to get to that next level of not just hiring a baseline amount of employees, but making sure we are, adequately staffed up. COVID didn't help in terms of stresses to our employees. So the workload increased, and COVID adds, though working remotely does have benefits in terms of maybe not having a commute and things like that. The whole COVID cloud really, kind of had a negative impact. So we want to get to that next stage, not just of hiring people, but also keeping them. And then also look at what it's going to take in terms of flexibility that I may have to make certain changes during the year. So what I'd like to do with that is actually bring it to the executive committee on June 25th in terms of more of an outline of what we'll be looking at in the coming year, and then tee this up for the board's consideration in August and September. The second focus area is we are moving into an operations mode with 12 renewable power purchase agreements are going to start coming online. This is what you've approved over the last 3 years, and we've committed $1.6 billion for this. These PPAs are coming online starting in December. This is going to involve a very different kind of work led by Monica's group, and also having some oversight and support from Amrit's group. And we are working along with 3CE, with whom we have partnered in many of these agreements. So there's a lot that's going to happen here, and it'll probably take us about 1.5 years to 2 years to settle into a steady state on operating our PPAs. The third focus area is first procurement. We talked about the 11,500 megawatts of mandated procurement we have. And then the clean energy mix. Right now, we shoot for a 50% renewable, 50% carbon-free mix. So this was something that you set in 2016. But now we've met that goal. We want to know, and we want to say, do we want to change that? Do we want to go higher than 50%? So that's an initiative that Monica will lead. And the last piece of this focus is called integration. And that may be the newest piece, which is as we integrate our resources, we're going to have to work much closer with the California Independent System Operator. And so just 2 months ago, you approved a scheduling coordination agreement with Z Global. And our staff is going to be working closely with Z Global to schedule those resources into our load. It's also related to things like what board member Mekachek talked about how flexible our battery discharge may be. Those are the kinds of decisions that we would be making. And in addition to that, demand flexibility is going to be even more important for our business in the years going forward. And in order to monetize and really get the maximum value out of demand flexibility, we have to be having a certain baseline knowledge within the CAISO and also advocate for the rules that will allow our investments behind the meter for demand flexibility to be recognized. So that's something that will be of value to Amy's group and Monica's group, and of course, from a bottom line standpoint to Amrit too. The fourth focus area is financial stability and trade-offs. We want to make sure that we continue to be investment grade credit rating. We have very strong reserves as of today. Our reserves are about $170 million at 240 days cash on hand. We want to continue to do that. In order to do that, we have to have the sophisticated modeling that's required to to do scenario planning and energy risk management. We are also going to be transacting on the prepay agreement. You have been updated on the prepay agreement, and in a few months, we should be bringing you the actual transactions on that. The trade-offs piece is something that we probably don't have to deal with next year, but it is something that as a board, we should discuss, which is if push comes to shove to keep our finances strong, we may have to give on other priorities. Today, our priority is 100% carbon-free and a discount to PG&E. With the volatility of the generation rates, PCIA, and energy prices, if we have a series of negative financial years, there are things that you can trade off to make sure that the agency continues to be financially healthy. So that's another project that Amrit will be leading along with Monica, because this is going to require maybe changes to our portfolio. But this is something more for your planning benefit. The last focus area is internal operations, which includes business process optimization that we teed up for you several months ago. Amrit talked to you about this, which is we need to move to this next level of sophistication where not only do we have our energy risk management program in place, but we need the systems that would monitor it effectively so that it could be of service to folks in the front office, middle office, and back office. And cyber risk management is something that we are going to elevate to get an agency-wide focus on what is our defensive posture, both from an IT perspective and also from a human firewall perspective, to make sure that all of us are trained to keep SVCE safe. So I've been talking a lot, but to summarize, these 5 focus areas are what I would like your broad feedback on. And then that will help us with the August Finance Committee and board meetings. It'll help us with our budget. It'll help me with my goals too. I'll go to the next slide and then come back here for your comments. So in terms of next steps, we will be talking to the executive committee on June 25th about staffing issues. On August 2nd, we'll be with the finance committee on budget. August 11th, budget again with the whole board. And September 8th, hopefully we will be talking about the budget like, all right, enough already, let's move on because you've heard about it several times. I also want to remind you that there is a detailed work plan that's aligned with board priorities and strategic plan that accompanies what discussion today will be. Andrea, if you can go back one slide, please. I'd like to now stop speaking and ask the chair if we can get comments.
Great, thank you. Since this is a discussion item, I'm going to actually see if there's public comment first. Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If you're in the attendee box, please raise your hand or *9 on the phone. And I don't see any. Do we have any written comments? Nope. All right, then I will close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Any questions or comments for our CEO? Yes, Director Wiley. I'm sorry, Director Willie.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe we can go back to that previous slide. I mean, I think that helps with the talking points. And so, I think, the operations are being run really well. I mean, last year with the power agreements that got added, great. So then that would bring me to the concern about the staffing running to stand still. And so a couple different comments. And so the first one, the staff themselves, turnover and what causes people to move on. One of them is, overworked or stress, things of that nature. And we're dealing with this COVID environment. And so I'm not surprised that people are considering, moving around or leaving one occupation for greener pastures. And so what I would toss out is, I think I'm probably pretty typical with everybody. We're working from home. We have our computers on, probably close to all awake hours, if not 24/7. But that, I think, conceivably contributes to the continuous stress. And so I would say that, if we could kind of support the employees, the staff, and encourage them to try to keep their job to the type of workday that they had before it became working from home almost, all awake hours. And so with that, having, heard about this, to kind of say, one of the things I think that might help encourage people, if you tell them that, the company, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, in an interest to try and reduce the stress level to support the employees, actually suggesting that they turn the computer off at say 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And if it's off, hopefully they're less likely to keep going back to check the emails, to do one more thing, which for any one day, probably not an issue. But when it's continuous all the time, I just feel that I think that's one of the reasons why people start getting edgy and open to seeing what else there is out there, because things are a little bit, stressful where they are. So I toss that one out. And then I also toss out that I think, Garish has such a important job, and turnover conceivably is a draw on him. For the time he needs to be really keeping things running as efficiently, as effectively, as advancing it as much as he can. And yet with that kind of turnover, running to stand still. And so with that, I would toss out that being such a small company, a small staff, you know, having a very connected recruiter and trying to maximize the use of that recruiter. Well, if it's a specialized position, you know, I'm thinking it's pretty typical. For a particular specialized position, get a recruiter, let them kind of do the market search and come back with somebody. But I'm thinking that to really have the best connection with a recruiter, you know, let them know that you want to use them as the recruiter for almost all your positions that need to be filled. And that then I think would motivate the recruiter to really stay on top of this industry and the expected personnel that'll be needed if they really feel that we're going to be going back to them time and time and time again, not just on a very, very rare occasion when we need something specialized. So I'd like to say I support doing anything we can to help Garish, you know, have a smoother, more contiguous staff that let him really focus his time where it's most effective through our operations. Sorry to be so wordy, but figure I'd toss those out. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Dr. Fligor.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll pick up where Director Wiley left off on the staffing issue. And he mentioned a couple of things that it may be attributed to, but I imagine Garesh and the rest of the staff is doing an even deeper dive, because I'm sure even though, you know, COVID and what we've all been through this past year has been a direct impact on our staffing, I'd be curious to know if there are other reasons why we have this high turnover in the last several months, and what other CCAs are seeing. For example, is the turnover also high at the other CCAs? So I'd appreciate Garish and staff really doing a deep dive so we can better understand why we're seeing this turnover, and if there are things we can do to increase retention. And to Director Weiler's point, I definitely support Garish and the team figuring out what we need to do to retain our staffing so that we can get all this work done. You know, we have these 5 focus areas, but I also see on the side that we have a staff work plan, and I don't see the details of the staff work plan, but I would want to flag for Garish that to the extent, you know, that work plan relies heavily on staff we don't currently have. One thing we may be able to do is look to see if we can push out some of the projects or plans we have in the near future to reduce the impact on our current staff. If that's also a concern where people may not have the bandwidth to do all the things that we would like them to do. And so I would definitely recommend looking at capacity, looking at workload, and revisiting possibly this work plan, and also the board strategic plan, because all of this you know, comes directly from our priorities and our work and/or focus areas, to see if there are things that we need to say, let's put this on hold or let's push this out because we do not have the staff to support that work currently. The other focus area I wanted to touch on briefly is the financial stability and trade-offs, and I'm happy to see this on the focus area. A matter of fact, when the team was talking about the cash out policy, I was thinking back, I feel, and maybe it's just me, over the last several months, I feel like we have been making changes to our policies and perks that we've provided to customers over the years. You know, apart from being carbon free, there are other things that distinguish us from PG&E, and I like that about us. And so as we think about the trade-offs in order to continue to maintain our financial stability, I wouldn't want us to chip away at some of the benefits that we provide to our customers. And so I want us to be very aware of this. And I think it's an important discussion for us to have as a board, what our mission is and who do we want to be as an organization in the next 5 to 10 years, and recognize that if we still want to pursue or keep certain goals or offer certain benefits to our customers, because that's why they stay with us and that's what attracts them, then this could mean, a negative impact to our financial stability or what that looks like. So I'll stop there, but those are the two, I think these are the great focus areas. And I like the way it's framed to adapt to industry changes because we are part of a bigger industry. But would appreciate staff really delving into the staffing issue, the capacity issue, and just having that future discussion on the trade-offs and financial stability as a board item. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Director Larson.
Thank you. Yeah, I really agree that staffing is just so important. Our staff are the heart and the core of our organization and ability to be effective. So I'm glad to see that. I think really it not only is the first bullet, but it's also embedded in some of the other points as well. And overall, it seems to me like these are very important focus areas for strengthening our organization and also taking operations to the next level of sophistication. So I think it's really important that we focus on these. At the same time, I realize there are so many other things that we also do that I'm sure are under the staff work plan. We're just talking about what programs the customers might benefit from, but also there are programs that benefit our cities, such as working on reach codes recently, building electrification, EV infrastructure. So I'd like to understand better how those kinds of programs fit in. Are they captured under this staff work plan, and what? How do we see those evolving going forward?
Thank you. Vice Chair?
Thank you. I appreciate the board's conversation and from all our colleagues. Girish laid out quite a bit for us. So for me, there are two things running in my mind, which is, as indicated there, the CEO's goals are directly related to these strategic plans and focus areas. And we are just beginning that. So I'm quite engaged with what is on this page and how that's going to play out with the CEO's goals and our priorities and budgets going forward. And the second thing that's influencing how I look at things, and this will not come as a surprise to any of you, I'm sure. I'm definitely a traditionalist. So it takes a lot for me. I use the phrase, I bit my tongue more than once. It takes a lot for me to go outside what I consider traditional norms, and like salaries and numbers of positions and work ethic and all of that. And it has certainly been very obvious, educationally obvious to me, that Silicon Valley Clean Energy is a niche organization. It is a group of people with very, very specialized skills. And that really is an important understanding for me going forward. So when I hear comments from Girish about staff feeling overworked, that says a lot to me. COVID, of course, influences that, but staff overworked. We have an extremely small staff for the volume and type of business that we're in. And we're making a whole lot of new experiences with the operational modes of the PPAs coming online and everything else that's here. So I also looked back at the number of times that Garish has had to come to the board to make changes in staff, to make changes in staff titles, to add staff, to restructure the organization. And to me, that's a tremendous amount of his time and staff time associated with it. Similar to what was said by others, a deep dive, I think Director Flygore said, a deep dive into how other CCAs provide the CEO with flexibility on staffing. I think we need, one is to help find a quick solution to staff feeling overworked. We don't need to have Garish come back to 2 or 3 committees and a board taking a couple of months. I think that's has been and is currently a problem. So I think we need to understand what's a reasonable amount of flexibility to give Garish, the CEO, as the executive of an organization. I'm also supportive, and I think Garish mentioned it a little bit in his report, but not quite phrased this way, is we need a depth of staff. We need flexibility within staff, cross-training in staff, people who will grow with the organization, who can mentor each other. So I think we've been running a little bit too lean. And I would support all of these conversations looking at, I'm going to say, a 5-year staffing plan rather than, I'd almost say, a month-to-month or a six month to 6 month staffing. I think we need, now that the organization is close to maturing. The organization has been very successful because of the innovation, which is beyond the business of operations. It's our mission statement really generates a different demand and capacity of staff. And I think we need to recognize that if that's our mission statement, then we need to back it up with the right staff and the right flexibility. And I noticed in the consent item, there were signing bonuses. And I'm not a big fan of signing bonuses, but I understand that the marketplace is of interest to getting people's attention. But what I care about is longevity. So I offer an example of police departments. I think we all are being challenged with filling out our police departments and having the right combination of benefits to attract people, but also to retain them so they don't get poached. And what Campbell is doing is we now give longevity bonuses. And the longevity bonuses, in our case, because of PERS, don't connect with PERS. So that's a good thing. But we give 5-year longevity bonuses and 10-year and 15-year longevity bonuses. So I would encourage, part of this analysis is not only how do we attract people, but how we keep people. We really want to get out of the mode of exhausting people, losing people, and having to find new people. And one last point is our PD overhires. We are authorized for 42 uniformed officers. We typically have 48 in the pipeline because not everybody works out and people retire, whatever. So we work really hard to make sure that we don't go below the 42. So just as an example. I liked everything that Garish said. I totally agree with whoever just said it, that staffing is the heart of the organization. It's important that that the staff knows how much the board recognizes and appreciates what's been accomplished. And we want to be there for the success of the organization, which means their success.
Thank you. We'll go to Director Beltran. Martinez Beltran.
Thank you, Chair. One, I wanted to say that I agree with the longevity bonus. I really like that. Thank you, Liz, for that point. In talking about staff, at first, I thought the 15% increase to the 25% was a bit much for me. I appreciate where you're at. And so, I mean, I think that's a great suggestion. It would be great maybe if I really liked that longevity bonus, maybe a percentage of that goes towards that. But my hope is that in moving forward with that this will enable us to build capacity with staff. It seems like from all of the messaging that we've received, at least this past year, especially with COVID, that it has, as you said, we've been kind of running in place and hasn't really given us an opportunity to build our capacity. I really want to see our teammates being able to do that and build capacity with each other and within the organization and across other organizations that we work with. So that's number one. Number two, I wanted to focus on the equity piece. And I know that we talked about this a few months ago when it came up, but not only was it a year of COVID and fires, but of social justice. And I want to make sure that that isn't swept under the rug. I'm not saying that it is. I have to say our staff is very diverse. I think we do a great job at that. I just want to make sure that we're keeping our eye on things like our hiring and continuing to fix and look at how we do, where we outreach to when we're working with recruiters, what is their, what are the modes and channels that they do outreach to make sure that we're getting diverse candidates as well. I think that the hybrid meetings feed into that equity piece. So looking forward, to that. And then where we used or where we do the community funding, we had an opportunity where we did some community funding and that went to every city, and maybe thinking about targeting high need or communities' interest in our various cities rather than just giving it to the cities, but saying this, this should maybe be used toward trying to bring in diverse users or capturing a diverse group that can help us hit those targets. So that's something that I was really interested in. And then again, looking at our contractors, consultants, and workforce training and making sure that we're doing women-owned, minority-owned, disabled, lots of diversity in there as well. My third point would be on the finances, and I agree with very important conversation to have. Also wanted to looking at the carbon-free, staying carbon-free. I think that's really a point for us. The discount to the PG&E, what I've learned this last year is that that's a little bit flexible. And then also looking at, what our reserve level is, if we feel that we still need to continue to have the reserves that we've had. I don't think that I certainly am a newer director here, but I think there's also been some learning that's happened as we've come into our own as SVCE. So, and those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tyson.
Thank you, Chair. When I signed up, or when I put my hand up, I thought I'd have some remarkable things to say, but it turns out that all the other people have said some really good comments. So I'll be relatively brief in that. And just to say that I see the balancing act that we have to do. In short, these look like the right sorts of goals. I approve of them. And I think some of the things we're talking about are important for us to really understand. For example, the operations mode with as we have more of these contracts coming online. So what I will say is that whole issue about financial stability and trade-offs, I think we had a good example just a few minutes ago when we were talking about the rate for the people with the excess production, to say we could go for the most money for us, or we could try to balance it with some of the things we've promised in the past and some of these equity issues I've heard other people say about. And I think I heard Girish say that we had 240 days of cash on hand. So we're in a position to say, let's be strategic and thoughtful. And what I'm hearing, and I'm agreeing with it, is the support for the staffing to give Girish this capability in terms of the numbers, and then also the compensation approach, and make sure that we get those long-term sorts of employees that are necessary to make all of these things work. And so I'll close by saying I like the comments from Vice Chair Gibbons about the police hiring and how they've approached it there. I'm associated with 2 other organizations right now that are facing unusual turnover. And right now it's very hard to say what is the post-COVID impact. And I think we just need to have more tools in our belt to make sure that we continue to have better employee retention and that we get those capable employees that are capable of doing many things. And then also the final comment, what Director Flagger said about let's recalibrate the goals in the meantime. Let's take a look at the workload. And if there's something that we'd like to do that we promised, but it's okay to put that off or do a different way or staff a different way, we should be receptive to that. And I think that'd be the message that I would give to Girish. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Walia?
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief as well. A lot of excellent comments have been made. I agree with the list of the focus areas here. The key issue clearly, 6 months here, and practically every time I'm reading something in the staff report about the staff retention. So clearly that jumps out at me as well. There is a staff retention issue. I'm sure Girish knows a lot more about this, and I would like to hear some of the ideas and strategy, Girish, you may have. If you want to share now, I can pause, or if you want to come back with it, that works for me. So I'll give you a moment if you want to jump in with some information. Otherwise, I'll continue with my comments.
I think you're hitting on many of the things that we are thinking of. I think it's a combination of, I think, getting the right number of people. The idea that Board Member Gibbons provided about the overhiring, it's almost like having a margin, like a buffer. I mean, because the risk is so asymmetric, right? When you have someone who leaves and then you have to hire, there may be a 6-month gap when things, and it just puts so much churn in the organization. I think flexibility to be provided to me to be able to change titles and even salaries within constraints that you would impose on me and the budget. So I think the ideas that I've got so far from all of you are very, very much in line with what we are thinking about and what we're going to do. And I also like the idea about looking at our goals also. It's not only about adding capacity. Let's look about prioritization and maybe resetting some of our expectations. So it's managing upward with the board to say, and the community, because, you know, the community was very much part of creating SVCE, and we do have a climate emergency. We want to accomplish a lot right now. It's really balancing that out. And this is going to be a continuous kind of process. So I think the strategic discussion has been amazing so far. And I know we're not done with the comments yet, but it's exactly what we want to do that will help me and all our staff, you know, deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Girish. So I agree with a lot that has been said by Director Flagger as well as Vice Chair Gibbons, especially about keeping in mind the changes, both in terms of capacity as well as looking more closely with other CCAs, exploring ideas there. And in addition to that, what Girish just pointed out. And I do like Director Flagger's point that we need to consider the change, maybe a little more carefully consider making changes to policy so that there are certain incentives that are provided to customers and we take a balanced approach. I think that's something that we should not put too far aside. There are a lot of pieces that the organization is juggling and moving forward with a lot of new technology working towards the climate change goals that we have. And I'll pause right there. I mostly agree with all that has been suggested, all fabulous ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other directors? I guess I wanted to just add a few comments. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Girish, for bringing this forward. I always appreciate how you're looking at what's on the horizon and bringing it to us in a timely manner. And I very much agree with your the suggested changes in the focus areas. As long as I've been on this board, I guess I've always my impression has been because of what we do, we're sort of reliant quite a bit on external forces, and so because of that, and then I think also there's that. There's also I think as Silicon Valley, we are pretty ambitious in what we want to do. And then I see now, given the alignment of the federal government, state, and what we're doing, a lot of opportunity is coming, I believe. And so my sense is that even though we would like to maybe temper workload, and I don't know if we really can at this point in time. And so the way to really address that would be to add staffing. I agree with the vice chair. I think we have run very lean the first, the beginning, but I think we're at a next phase in our organization. And so I think that is really key to make, that to address probably the expectations that I feel from our community. I think staffing is really, it's challenging right now. I think we've all felt it at the city level this past year. I know in our city, we have quite a few vacancies. People have left, retired, moved away to cheaper places to live. And I think everyone, maybe folks have really been rethinking what they want to do, their priorities in life. And so we have to adjust to that. I think the flexibility in terms of schedules and locations that we talked about at the last meeting will be helpful. But I also do agree, and I think it's also an element of just our growing too, that we should give our CEO flexibility to do the staffing changes that are necessary. We're growing, and in our municipal governments, it's right that we all have city managers who do that day to day, and we as a board are more about policy and budget. So I think we need to start adjusting it to more of that kind of structure to be able to really keep up with the changes happening in the workload that we have. So I definitely agree with some of the other comments about flexibility, over hiring. Yeah, if we can. I think I guess my concern is, as someone mentioned, we're in a very specialized field. So I think it's just going to be really hard to find enough folks to fill the openings we have. But if we can overhire, I think that's great. And I appreciate the comment about longevity. I also think, one of the challenges is that we're a pretty flat organization, and I think about this quite a bit more and more as I get older, but I feel like there's some generational philosophical differences, and that's something that we have to also keep in mind. And because we're small, because we're pretty flat, there's not a lot of room to move up, and we might need to start to add those types of incentives to keep folks around longer. So a lot to talk about think about in the staffing area. One other item, and this is something that Girish and I talked about, was HR. We've, I think, contracted out, but maybe we're at a point where we need to at least add more hours or think about bringing that in-house as well. So yeah, I think there's some a lot of things that we can work on on the staffing level. I appreciate you're adding cyber risk management. We've had enough incidents recently, especially with utilities, that's of top priority. And in terms of the financial stability and trade-offs, yes, I would expect us to, those are the policy calls that the board should be making. I've always, appreciated balance. I think that that's really the way that we probably want to go, but we'll have those conversations moving forward. So yeah, I think this is great. We're on the right track, and more to come.
Madam Chair, I think Director Mekchuk had something to say.
His hand go up. Thank you. Director Mekchuk.
Thank you. One of the things that I don't think we've discussed is that SVCE is a good place to come from. And what I mean by that is I think that some of the turnover is because our employees are very attractive to other CCAs. And I think if you look at the life cycle of the CCAs that we've got in place in California, we're at more of the leading edge, and our employees are very attractive to other CCAs. And one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is scale. And if you look at PG&E and the scale that they have, and then you look at SVCE and how small we are, and then you say, well, there's other CCAs that are also small. Is there a strategic opportunity? I don't mean in the next 6 months, I mean over a couple of years, to put things into place where we can have some shared services. And if you think of the operations with the other PPAs coming online, and you look at who we're sharing our capacity with, maybe there's some opportunities to share with other CCAs and or maybe forge closer partnerships with those CCAs. But that would raise a number of governance issues. So I think this is a good list, but I think change is going to continue, and I would look at that as opportunities, and I think it's kind of exciting.
Thank you. Any other directors? Don't see any more hands. I hope that is helpful, Ms. Girish. Seems like that.
Yeah, I really wanted to thank all of you. I can't tell you how important it is to have a strong staff board relationship, and I tend to be the translator sometimes on both sides. And I think just this input has been very good. We'll translate this into policy and action to move our SVC ship forward. We will loop back on many of the issues and some questions that were brought up back when we come in August. I may reach out to one or two of you, but I would want to make a point right now about equity. Equity continues to be part of our work plan and strategic plan. And as a matter of fact, Jessamine Allen, who has been hired recently, half her time is going to be working on this. She, Amy, and Melissa, they have a team together, and we're actually going to be coming back to you in November with an equity framework, which is going to be looking at its employees, suppliers, and our customers. So this is one of those in-flight kind of initiatives. We put that in last year, so now it's in flight. So that's part of the work plan now. So we don't want to, you'll see it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If there isn't anything else on this item, I will close item 9, and we will move on to board members. If you have any announcements and direction on future agenda items. Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention two things. Today, I attended the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's Climate Forum. It's the second one in a series that they're doing. And the main speaker was the Secretary of Energy. And she was really interesting in clearly trying to sell the jobs plan and all of that, but was also quite enthusiastic about new innovative ideas and the potential for a green economy. And she mentioned nuclear. And there were panels with senators and congressmen. Congressman, oh dear, is it Panetta from down south, was one of the speakers, along with a senator, and they were, talking. There was conversation about equity, particularly along the Monterey Peninsula and the people who were living there. So there was a really dynamic discussion about what needs to be done and how much the jobs plan would work to help the people that were not doing well in the economy before, never mind now, across the whole country. So very interesting discussion. I was glad I was able to listen in on that. And the second one I wanted to mention was Congresswoman Eshoo. Every year since she's been elected, she has a student advisory board, and that's where juniors and seniors from high schools throughout her district come together. And I think there were about 70 of them this year. And they picked a topic of climate change. And they came up with, that was the focus, and they came up with 14 different approaches. And they were all innovative and fascinating. And I'm hoping that that's available on a webpage so you can enjoy seeing the young people, very professionally done. And there was equity in that one. There was nuclear in that one. All kinds of great ideas. And I wanted to be sure to see there's a wonderful group of young people that fit into some of our initiatives and programs that Amy's working on. So there's a lot of great young people out there, and I was very excited to listen to all they had researched and done.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Yes, Director Hilton.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. So just wanted to give you all a quick update that this year I got incorporated into our goals for City Council to really look at green infrastructure and that as a priority. So that's actually listed. And I also got the REACH codes to be reintroduced for our City Council. So after the summer recess, there'll be a chance for SVCE to get a good shot and staff to get a good shot at actually being able to put those in front of City Council, and maybe it's a mid-cycle adoption or for next cycle. But I just wanted to pass that along to this group so we can join you all officially. Thank you.
Yay, that's great news. Thank you so much for your leadership. Anyone else? I just wanted to mention I was on a MTC workshop this afternoon where we heard from all of the transit agencies in terms of how they are moving into recovery post-COVID. And one of the themes I kept hearing was, as you probably know, transit agencies are required to go to zero emissions vehicles. And one of the biggest challenges, and what I kept hearing from all the agencies, is the charging piece to that. And so I appreciate Girish adding transportation as one, or elevating that as one of our goals. And yeah, I look forward to partnering more closely with our transportation authorities and agencies to tackle some of these issues. So with that, a couple other announcements. You should have received a couple of emails regarding our CEO evaluation process that's underway. So please take a look at that and respond as soon as you can. And I believe we are dark in July, if that's correct. So our next meeting will be in August. And if there is nothing else with that, we will stand adjourned at 9:04 p.m. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great summer break. We will see you soon, and please stay safe. Take care.